Today on The Big Story, the man who allegedly looted Malaysia's sovereign wealth fund 1MDB escapes American justice. On again, off again, will the rapid transit system between Singapore and JB ever happen? Which is more important to younger Singaporeans, race and religion or LGBT rights? The answer may surprise you. Hello and welcome to The Big Story. We'll be talking about the hottest topics of the day right in the heart of the newsroom. I'm Kimberly Jho. So the man who allegedly looted Malaysia's sovereign wealth fund 1MDB for billions of dollars appears to have escaped American justice. Fugitive financier Jho Low has reached a wide-ranging settlement with the United States Department of Justice. Under the deal, US authorities agree that all disputes linked to the 1MDB scandal will stand resolved, while Low will give up claims to assets valued at over $1 billion. The settlement stresses that there is no admission of guilt on behalf of Low and those linked to him. Joining us live from KL right now is ST's regional correspondent Leslie Lopez. Hello.
Hi Kimberly.
Hi. So we know that Jho Low is sort of wanted in Singapore and in Malaysia as well, right? So with this, is he a free man or is this just for the US?
Well, for a person who is wanted in Malaysia and Singapore, and he also has quite a number of the Interpol red notices on him, he is relatively in the US. This settlement today doesn't actually release him off the hook. While they've settled the civil forfeiture cases, Low still faces a criminal charge in the Eastern District New York Court. We understand that there are negotiations going on now for something towards a settlement on this front. That would, of course, make him completely free in the US. At this point in time, we understand that he's somewhere in the United Emirates, and he's also secured asylum in a third country, unknown third country, but somewhere in Europe. So, for being the most wanted financial fugitive, he's kind of free still.
I see. So why exactly did the DOJ sort of decide to settle with Jho Low?
Well, in cases like this are extremely complex, and what happens typically with the DOJ is that rather than go into lengthy litigation where the outcomes are really unknown, they sometimes choose to go into these kind of settlements, extract huge amounts of money, and often with the first people charged walking away without any admission of guilt. And I think this is one of those cases, actually, this complex case where they've decided to do that.
So what does this settlement sort of mean exactly for the 1MDB trial of former PM Najib?
That really is an interesting point, because the Malaysian government has leaned heavily on the filings of the asset foreclosures or seizures when framing the charges against Mr. Najib and other principal players in the 1MDB scandal. So, this kind of resolution actually is clearly going to pose many challenges for the prosecution's case in the ongoing trial. So far today, the defense has yet to bring this Mr. Jho's settlement up, but I expect them to do so, in the coming days.
Right. So when since this news has broken, what has the reaction in Malaysia been like?
That's another interesting thing. The reaction actually has been pretty muted, very muted. We haven't had any major statement from any senior government official or politician, let alone the Attorney General or even the Malaysian Anti-Corruption Agency. So at this point, I think people are still digesting what this settlement that has caught the business communities here and in Singapore by surprise. And the politicians, I'm sure they will say something in the coming days.
I see. So we'll wait. It remains to be seen for now, yeah? Thanks for coming to share more with us. For more on this story as it develops, do stay tuned to our website. That's straitstimes.com. Staying with news coming out of Malaysia, the roller coaster saga over the JB Singapore Rapid Transit System link has finally come to an end. The project to build an MRT across the causeway had been delayed twice before at the request of Malaysia, but today Prime Minister Mahathir delivered the good news. The Malaysian Cabinet has given its approval to proceed with the RTS project. This comes after a reduction in estimated cost. From 4.93 billion ringgit down to 3.16 billion ringgit, this is a 36% reduction. And with me today is ST's Deputy Political Editor, Royston Sim. Hello.
Hi, Kim.
So after all these delays, right, we finally have some sort of confirmation, right, that the RTS is going to be built. So why is it so important that this railway be built?
Right, two reasons. The first is that every day there's about roughly 300,000 crossings at the causeway, so it's very heavily congested. During especially during the weekends, public holidays, the causeway gets really jammed up, and so the purpose of the RTS is to sort of alleviate congestion at the causeway. It's designed to have a capacity of 10,000 passengers in one direction per hour. Wow. So you can imagine if it's built, it will sort of ease the burden on the causeway, and that's one of the reasons both governments have said that they are keen to proceed with the project. The second reason is that when the RTS was signed, Singapore and Malaysia signed the RTS agreement back in January 2018 last year. It was a legally binding bilateral agreement, which means that both countries, whether there was a change in government or not, are obliged to proceed with it. And so should the project now proceed, I think it augurs well for in terms of bilateral cooperation.
I see. Yeah. So now that this project is in play, the high-speed rail project that connected Singapore and KL, that was suspended when Dr. Mahathir came into power, right? So does today's RTS announcement, this go ahead, does it give us hope that the high-speed rail might also be on the track?
Well, it's a positive development for sure. Let's go back. Both countries agreed to, and they signed an agreement to suspend RTS in September last year, and the suspension is for 2 years till May 2020, so next year.
Okay.
So after that, they will come back, and Malaysia has to decide whether it wants to proceed with the project or not. It has, like with the RTS, it has cited costs as one of the main concerns. They felt that the project was too costly. So now that they've managed to find ways to bring down the cost for the RTS, fingers crossed that they'll be able to do something similar for the high-speed rail, and the project can then proceed. So the initial sort of time frame for completion for the high-speed rail was December 2026. With the 2-year suspension, it was pushed back to January 1st, 2031. And so, I think that very much remains to be seen, how that will play out.
I see. So we'll fingers crossed, and we'll see.
Yeah, that's right.
So what does it say, what will it say rather about the relationship between Singapore and Malaysian governments if both or one of the rail projects were to be completed?
I think it would signal that both countries are able to sort of work out their differences and still cooperate and get projects done. I think since the Pakatan Harapan government has taken over, there have been sort of certain rough patches. There were the disagreements over maritime boundaries and so on. So it has sort of been, the relationship has been rocky. But I think if both governments were able to eventually push out and complete one or both of these projects, I think it would signal, that they are able to cooperate, and hopefully that means more cooperation in future as well.
I see. So it will be a good sign.
Yeah, that's right.
Well, thanks for sharing more with us, Roy.
Thank you.
And if you'd like more on this story, do head on to our website. Once again, that's straitstimes.com. Now, it seems that younger Singaporeans want the government to be more involved in a host of new issues that have emerged. According to a study by the Institute of Policy Studies, a large majority of Singaporeans are aware of the seriousness of race and religious issues. But fault lines have emerged on class, immigration, and LGBT rights. The study found that if mismanaged, these issues are seen to impact Singaporeans' trust in the government the most, compared to race and religion. Joining me now is senior political correspondent Grace Ho. Hello, Grace.
Hello.
So my first question to you is, what's new about these results?
Well, first let's start with what's not so new, which
Okay.
is that most Singaporeans, a large majority of them, are actually very familiar and sensitized with race and religion issues.
Right.
So, well, it just goes to show that national education, to some extent, has worked here,
Right.
as well as some of the harder legislation, like your Maintenance of Religious Harmony Act.
Right.
Yeah. But I think what's interesting is that for newer fault lines like class and immigration and LGBT issues, the younger Singaporeans actually feel that there ought to be more state involvement as well as public discussion. So these issues also, about 40% of them feel that if these issues are not managed well, it would actually affect their trust levels in the government,
Right.
as well as their sense of national identity.
Whoa.
And this is a much higher percentage than, say, on race and religion.
Right. 40% is a significant.
It's pretty significant, yeah. So perhaps, I mean, on a broader level, the researchers in the study were saying that it may well be that people already feel that the government has very robust frameworks and policies in place for race and religion. And so they like to kind of pivot to other issues like class and immigration, where they feel that the government can do more.
Right. It's an interesting take on the study. And in fact, the study actually says that younger respondents called for greater public discourse and government involvement, as you mentioned earlier. So what does that look like exactly?
Well, I think for the younger respondents, they want to go beyond not just public discussion, but to actually personally take action.
Right.
So one of the survey questions that was posed to them was, if you received a phone message or an email saying that a particular business discriminates against someone of a particular race and religion, how would you respond? And 2/3 of those who were aged 18 to 25 said that they would ask their friend, who forwarded this to them, what was this about, and try and find out the source of this information, compared to about half of the respondents who were aged 65 and above. So this means that to a certain extent they are more aware of, say, race or religion issues, and feel that they feel more strongly about discrimination. But it could also mean that going forward, the younger generation prefers to take a more community-based and personal approach to these issues rather than top-down government policies and legislation.
Right. So they're the ones that are sort of truly involved in this sort of
Yes.
ground-up kind of way.
Yeah, and this kind of extends to another example, which is in the area of LGBT issues. So more than half of them would actually say that these issues could, if not managed well, would cause a greater anger and polarization, against particular communities in Singapore, compared to, let's say, the older Singaporeans and the ones who are less educated. So particularly on issues like, let's say, LGBT rights, equal rights, or let's say the repeal of Section 377A of the Penal Code, they feel more strongly about this than older Singaporeans. But if we just move away from the whole younger versus older demographic, and we look at Singaporeans in general, what's kind of interesting is that 6 out of 10 of Singaporeans actually feel very uncomfortable with religious people or religious leaders speaking out strongly on LGBT issues.
Oh.
So, well, the reasons are not completely clear, but what the study surmised was that the Singaporeans are generally sensitized to how these issues are quite. I mean, religion and politics, don't mix, and that attests to the success of government policy, where the clear lines have been drawn between the two. But also, there is a certain polarization if we go by religious lines, for instance. So the Christians and Muslims, close to 50% of them would actually be desirous of more state intervention, but for very different reasons.
Oh.
So for the younger Singaporeans, they would say, well, yeah, because we don't want discrimination, whereas the religious ones, more religious conservative ones would say, we want more state involvement because we want to hold the line on the status quo.
Flip of a coin.
Yeah, so like no repeal of 377A, we don't really want the Pink Dot rally and things like that. So this is definitely one area where you do see a fair degree of polarization compared to the other issues, even like class, immigration, race and religion. And going forward from the policy perspective, it may mean that it has to be managed very, very sensitively depending on which demographic you're actually addressing.
I see. Well, this is fascinating stuff. Thanks for sharing more with us, Grace. And if you'd like to read the full article with all the numbers and details and everything, do head on to our website. That's straitstimes.com. And those are our top news of the day. For more news and videos, do head on to our website. Once again, that's straitstimes.com. This has been Kimberly Jiao. Thank you for watching The Big Story, and we'll see you tomorrow.